Yes, ma'am. He still can sign it. Good evening. Good evening. Yes, sir. Good evening. Thank all of y'all for being here today. Today is March the 1st, 2022. We're here for our work session today on the first draft of the master plan, our Parks and Rec master plan. I'm going to go ahead and officially call this meeting to order today. I'm going to ask if Commissioner Henderson, if you would lead us in our prayer today, and Commissioner Mason, if you would lead us in our pledge, please.
Thank you, Mr. C. Dear Father, once again we come before you with thanksgiving in our hearts, my Father. We come just asking you to lead us and guide us in the way you will help us to go. We just thank you, give you all the praise. This we pray. In our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Guys, if you would come on up, we're going to ask Dwayne and his team to come on up tonight.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners. Appreciate y'all's time tonight. I'm actually just going to turn it over to Aaron and let him run y'all through this. We spent about 4 hours a couple of weeks ago going through the plan, so I'm anxious to see how he's going to get everything in about 45 minutes. So, Aaron.
Thank you, Dwayne. Good evening, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. It's good to see you again. As you know, over the last several months, we've been working on this comprehensive park and recreation master plan to look at the current state of affairs with the recreation department and assessing community need and determining a path forward so that we can improve and enhance the recreation opportunities for all the citizens of Newton County. So what I would do, as Dwayne noted, is try my best to consolidate the information in a reasonable time frame for you all. But basically, I wanted to highlight the public input process that we went through, give you a brief overview of the community profile study that we did, and then get into a little bit more in-depth information in terms of programming, budgeting, staffing, and then something that we call level of service assessment, and how all of this pulls together into a capital improvement plan for the county going forward. So in terms of public input, as you're aware, we had 5 community outreach meetings. We had some pretty decent attendance at most of those. We also had a separate walk-in meeting at the Recreation Center where the seniors kind of had their own time to be able to provide some information. We also had an online platform called Social Pinpoint where members of the community were able to log in, take an online survey, as well as give some live feedback on some of the thoughts and insights that they had about the needs for the community. And overall, we had a little over 100 participants in total throughout that process. One of the big things that we wanted to point out was we asked, especially in the public input forum, about the top community concerns as related to Parks and Recreation Department. And one of the number one things that they pointed out was the diversity of facilities. Now that could be anything from we have too many ball fields, or we have too few playgrounds. A lot of times it also translates into there are not enough of those facilities proximate to me, so making sure we have distributions. Some of the other highlights on there had to do with safety, as well as walkability and cyclability, basically access to those facilities. In terms of the Social Pinpoint, we wanted to ask specific questions to get feedback about programming, facilities, the general overall opinion about Newton County Parks and Recreation, and whether or not there would be some general support in order to go forward with these plans. And so I wanted to highlight some of those items for you all right now. Overall, when we asked everyone, generally speaking, majority of the community felt that the facilities were of good or adequate level of quality. Overall, out of all your facilities in your portfolio, Turner Lake, Denny Dobbs, and City Pond are your most frequently visited facilities, and there's no wonder why. They're absolutely beautiful, and they have a lot of diversity to serve the community at large. But Turner Lake, by far, is the most visited facility within the agency, and that has a lot to do with the recreation center that is currently located there, as well as the senior services center that is there. When we like to ask people, okay, if you don't come to Newton County Recreation Department, why is that? And one of the biggest things that came out of there was a lack of awareness. So just the community not being informed about what is available, where is it available, and how do you get more information. So we wanted to be able to highlight that as well. And again, the safety concern also came up as another option, another item that they cited for why they do not recreate here. You know, we are always interested to see if you are not coming to Newton County Recreation, where are you actually going? And so one of the interesting facts that came out was that about 2/3 of our survey participants indicated that they go outside of this community for their recreation. And the reasons for that had to do with facility diversity and quality. Okay, so we kind of seeing what the community need, the perception is here. And you can see that Rockdale, Gwinnett, and Walton County were indicated as the preferred other communities that they would go to for their recreation needs, for whatever reason that might be. Overall, we always like to ask people about how do you gauge access. More or less, our community said that they would be willing to walk to a facility if it was within a mile of their home or their work, but they'd be able to go a little bit further if they were able to cycle as well. Overall, the community feels that the recreation department is just as important as some of the other core departments. As elected officials, we're all aware that we have roads, bridges, water sewer infrastructure, police, fire. These are all critical departments that are serving vital roles to our community. But the community is also saying, don't forget about Parks and Recreation. That is also a critical service for us. And to that point, about 80% of our survey response indicated that they would be willing to support additional funding options to enhance recreation for the community as that funding becomes available. We always like to drill down on that question a little bit more and say, okay, well, if you're willing to support, how much would that be? And generally speaking, about 50% of participants said that they would be willing to incur direct costs to their household as part of that funding effort. And moreover, about 2/3 of those respondents said that somewhere in the neighborhood of $15 per month per household is what they would be willing to allocate financially towards that. And that is a very typical response rate that we see in most communities, especially across the Southeast, is that $15 per month per household number. Now, with that information, I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we see, what you are currently and where you are heading. Overall, you are a growing community, as I'm sure you are aware. Right now, you are on track. The last projections had you at about a 24% rate of growth over the next 10 years, hitting somewhere around 2030. That might be accelerating slightly with some of the new developments that are happening in terms of industry and manufacturing in the area. So that's important to pay attention to. In fact, when compared to some of your partner communities, you're actually growing at a faster rate. The only exception to that in our findings was Walton County. But there is also a significant delta in terms of population diversity across the county. I believe I have a map to show you that, but essentially the majority of your residents are situated somewhere along the I-20 corridor and particularly on the western side of the county. So that kind of goes a little bit into our planning efforts. And again, you can see this density map kind of showing you where people are actually located within the community. Obviously, the darker tone colors have your higher density rates. And one of the interesting things, it's not very apparent in terms of color, but the area, what I call the Fairview area, is significantly more dense than the rest of the community. Notwithstanding, there's still a lot of folks that have need, but the number difference in that area was very notable to our design team. Overall, you guys are, with that growth comes some age characteristics, some age trends. Generally speaking, your community is growing older, and your community is growing older at a slightly faster rate than some of the other benchmark communities. That adult population, that 45 over, is one of the higher growing segments of that population. There's still a lot of youth that are coming up as well, but it was interesting to note that senior population or the active adult population and where that is occurring. And what's critical for us to know is not only where are you going as a community, but where is that trend currently happening. And so we wanted to show you this here to show you that your northeast corner, basically bordering Walton County, has a significantly older population than the rest of the community. And conversely, on the flip side, some of your core population right here in the city of Covington is significantly younger and all that. Different people at different ages recreate differently. They demand different services. So that's another piece of the criteria that we go as part of our assessment of your facilities and program distribution. Generally speaking, your ethnicity distribution has been relatively stable. There is one unique fact, or two rather, that is I didn't expect when we were getting into this, is that you have a very low minority rate. You're very much well split between Caucasian and African American. Historically, it's been a predominantly Caucasian community. However, that trend is going to be flipping within the next 10 years. One of the things that we also like to look at is households with children. So about a third of your total households in your community have children living under that roof. The highest rates of that is basically in the southern portions of the county, coming straight down from here, Covington, going towards Jackson, Lake Jackson. Your lowest rates on the flip side, again, kind of that age correlation, is the northeast side, where you have significantly lower rates of households with children on that Walton County border. So again, different needs in specific areas, and so we wanted to make sure that we capture that information as part of our planning recommendations. Generally speaking, while this is a very economically healthy community, generally speaking compared to other communities, your household income rates are a little bit lower than some of your other peer communities that we were asked to review. And also the household values and corresponds with that are slightly lower as well. But again, in spite of that, it's important to know we looked at your budgets and your financials as a community, and this is still a very financially healthy community. So it's always it's always interesting to know these things, but nothing stood out to me on this one as cause for concern. That one little delta, again, kind of figuring out where that might happen. That northeast corner along Walton County has your highest density of households with higher income levels. Those lower income families, particularly below the poverty level, are situated in that central corridor, kind of South Covington, south of Porterdale. It's important to draw some correlations between these things. Those same communities that are living below the poverty line in these areas are also those communities where we said that we had higher levels of households with children. So there's a higher need in those areas for specific services that we want to make sure that we're addressing. I'd like to pivot a little bit and talk about your budget and what we are seeing. Briefly, I just want to make sure that we always like to tout that Parks and Recreation is an economic driver for a community. In addition to direct dollars through spending, through salaries, and all of that, there's obviously another aspect of this, and the fact that when a business decides to come in, when you were recruiting businesses and industries to come in, they're looking at quality of life as one of those criteria, in addition to whether or not you have adequate infrastructure like roads, bridges, water, and sewer. And so there's a direct correlation to the quality of recreation and lifestyle that's available in your community as to how it impacts you economically. We like to do benchmarking in order to get a better understanding of where you are financially. And so National Park and Recreation Association has what they call their annual agency performance review, where we have a massive amount of data nationwide, and it even breaks down that data into comparable communities so that we can see exactly how you fit into a comparable community either here in the state of Georgia, somewhere in the southeast, or somewhere else in the entire nation. But basically gives us a baseline of understanding of how we are comparing to other agencies and how they're performing in terms of financials, facilities, programs, and staffing. So we wanted to benchmark against your operating expenditures, look at how that breakdown is actually happening, and see how that relates to those other communities, how they're, and how also we're doing cost recovery for some of those expenditures. So there's a lot of information on here, but what I wanted to kind of drive down to you a little bit is there's multiple checkpoints in this. On average, for a typical agency in the nation, Their annual operating expenditure is somewhere around $4.8, $4.9 million, okay? When we drill down a little, that's nationwide. When we drill down to comparable agencies that are in line with your size and all that, it's a little bit different. It's more around $11.8 million per year, okay? Your operating budget right now is sitting around, it's just under $2.5 million. So in summary, you are operating about 51% of what in terms of a nationwide level, what agencies are doing, but you're only about 21% of what a typical agency your size with your population would typically be spending, okay? So that's one item that we wanted to point out for you. Another way that we kind of look at this in terms of like how we're spending our money is to look at it by a per capita ratio, right? It just kind of helps us drill down the data a little bit more. So again, that national average, the typical park and recreation agency is spending about $88 per person in their community. Your median agencies that are about the same population size as you is spending a little bit less. It's about 74, okay, so we're getting a little bit closer, right? But when we drill down a little bit even further, where we take that median agency and look at it in terms of population density, it's about $45, okay? So we feel like that $45 per person is about where we would expect your community to be. Currently, you're running at about just under $22 per person. This is about 48%, just under 50% of what we would typically expect peer communities to be able to spend. We also looked locally. I think you all are aware we asked the Parks and Recreation Department and some of you to give us some ideas on who do we want to be, who we want to measure against locally. So we were asked to measure against Fayette County, Bartow County, and Newton County. And this is kind of a breakdown of their populations, their expenditures, how that breaks down per person, as well as their median operating expenses. I do want to point out in here that Fayette County, they do not, their parks maintenance is completely funded by a different source. It's a different department, if I remember correctly. So there's a little disclaimer there. Looks like that they're doing really good, doing great services for $12.35 per person, but that's not really truly the case. So either way, you could see that if you take them out of the equation, we're still spending lower than some of our peer communities in the immediate area here in Georgia. Just a quick summary of that. Again, more or less, we're somewhere around, 2/3. We're only doing about 2/3 of the spending that we would like to be doing if we were to be comparable to some of those other communities. When we talk about the funding analysis, these are all the sources that are coming in order to get that budget. Generally speaking, you guys are, you're a little bit heavy in terms of the department being funded through just general tax fund support. You're about 27% higher than a typical agency would be. Another aspect of that is that you're actually a little bit lower than the typical agency in terms of revenue that you're generating, and that's your revenue off of fees, covering costs, rentals, and other things, just money coming back into the department for all those facilities and programs. So when we talk about cost recovery, these are the things that we are doing currently as a community in order to generate some revenue to come in to help offset some of our operating costs. And again, it's only about 12% of our current operating expenditures, which is, again, low by national standards as well as local standards. So to kind of put it a little bit better in terms of context, when we talk about cost recovery as a percentage of the operating expenditure, and this is a per resident analysis. Again, national departments, they're usually generating about $19 per resident. When we drill down to comparable size populations, it's about $15. A median agency, they're generally generating about $8.72 dollars per person for someone with your similar density, and that median cost recovery for that specific group is about 21%. So if we think about it in terms of how these numbers work, a formula that you can apply is that if you were to try to target that 21% average revenue on your budget, you should be trying to generate about $525,000 in terms of revenue and all that. If we were to go a little bit different route and we were looking at just in terms of like the median average for population density, we would probably be targeting, you know, upwards of almost $1 million in revenue. And all that money is going into this budget so that we can enhance recreation for the community. Another thing that we always like to point out briefly is how that expenditure gets broken out. Obviously, your personnel, your salaries, benefits, all that is typically your highest expense. Then it's followed usually by your operating expenses, you know, light bills, utility bills, you know, equipment and all that. And then capital funding for non-CIP. So that's making sure we have a mower ready to be purchased because we know one's about to die or a truck is dying, you know, those sorts of things. That's not necessarily the big, and it's some renovation projects, but it's not the major new capital expenditures. So right now, you all are about on par in terms of where we'd expect you to be spending on staffing and personnel, but you are low in terms of where we'd expect you to be spending in terms of operational expenses. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about that capital budget aspect. Right now, we did a facility assessment. We're going to talk a little bit more about facilities in a little bit. But we did a facility assessment, basically going out to every single facility that you have and assessing the need. More or less, brief summary is that parks are very well loved. The Parks Department is doing everything they can with the resources that are available to try to keep things in a quality condition, in a functional condition. Typical things is that, you know, whenever there's usually always some ADA concerns, there's always repainting. There might be some safety things that we need to do, also some signage, and just general upkeep that would typically be budgeted in any given year as a progressive, you know, capital expense. So we estimated all that at about $17 million currently in deferred maintenance on your existing facilities. And again, that's basically looking at the conditions and doing estimates on what needs to get fixed and they'll bring it up to current standards. That sounds like a scary number, right? But I do want to point out that on average, when we look at typical national standards, that's about in line with what most parks agencies usually carry over. They usually are carrying over about $17 million in deferred maintenance. However, that's a national standard. However, when we look at that same analysis point in terms of a comparable community for you all, it's much lower. It's about $7.1 million. So we still have a big hill to climb in order to bring our current facilities up to what I think the community standard would be before we really start digging into new facilities altogether. So obviously, our initial recommendations at this point are to be able to diversify our revenue streams in order to increase the department funding as much as we can. We would like to increase general fund contribution to align with those benchmark communities where it's possible. Critical item is cost recovery strategies. It needs to be well thought through. It needs to be tiered in order to make sure that we are getting adequate cost recovery for all of our facilities and programs, but not placing undue burden on the citizens, because at the end of the day, our citizens can only afford so much to be able to recreate, especially when they're already allocating tax dollars towards these things. Again, making sure that capital funding is included in that budget on an annual basis so we can, you know, stay ahead of the curve and not let things build up over time. And then whenever we can identify areas where non-personal operational expenses can be decreased, we want to do that, looking for partnership opportunities with other programmers who might be able to take the lead on certain things without us necessarily having to dedicate full-time or part-time staff towards that. So with that, I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about the programming assessment and what we've seen for your community. As a guiding principle, NRPA always talks about their 3 pillars. I won't read the whole text to you, but basically it means that whatever we're doing in terms of parks and recreation needs to support health and wellness for the community. It also needs to be able to promote social equity. Everyone should be able to have equal opportunity to be able to recreate. And also, we need to be stewards of our environment. Our programs and our facilities should take on some role in terms of conservation, sustainability. And believe it or not, I didn't put it up here, but the Recreation Department's mission statement almost mirrors that sentiment exactly. So we're very glad to hear that that is a goal for this community, because most people don't have that at all. So in terms of health and wellness, here's how our community is looking right now. Nationwide, in terms of being able to have access to exercise, the top agencies in the country are hitting about 91% of their population that have easy access to that. In Georgia, we're a little bit lower, we're about 75%. Newton County, on the data that we have, is slightly lower than that at about 73% in terms of the population being able to have access to exercise opportunities. Whether or not that's at their home, at recreation departments, or other private providers like, Planet Fitness or something like that, right? Kind of going inside with that is the physical inactivity by the percentage of population. Our top performers, only about 20% of the population is saying that they don't have any dedicated physical activity time. In Georgia, we're a little bit higher or a little bit worse off in terms of now we're about 28%. In Newton County, we're almost a third of the population says that they just have no physical activity access or time scheduled. All these things correlate. Obesity, again, Newton County, we're slightly, we're higher than national and state averages. And then in terms of diabetes, we are also trending higher as well. So these are all things in terms of health and wellness that Parks and Recreation can fix if we do it the right way, right? Pivoting a little bit, that was a lot of the health aspect. I'd like to talk about the wellness side. We have just gone through and are still kind of crawling out of the COVID epidemic, and obviously the mental toll as a result of this has really opened up our eyes onto making sure that we are there and providing services for people. Parks and Recreation offers avenues for us to be able to address those needs. So typically speaking, looking at social, emotional, and mental aspects is a high priority. And one of the things that we've always found is that volunteer efforts and community service efforts is one of the ways that the people are able to get out into the community and get that social interaction, but also be able to engage in activities that would reduce stress levels and improve overall mental wellness. Some of the ways that we do that is through our programming. Inherently, a lot of our programming alleviates stress, whether it's active programs such as baseball or football, or even yoga in the park. All these things help to lower stress levels and enhance mental stability and mental wellness. Also coinciding with that, our actual facilities work by exposing people to the outdoors, which is proven to reduce stress levels and increase overall health. So these are all tools that we have in our back pocket that we can do in order to improve the health and wellness. On that equity pillar, making sure that we have adequate connectivity to all of our facilities so that people have equitable access to our programs and facilities. Making sure that we have diversity of programming. Not everybody has a kid that plays youth baseball. Not everybody has a kid that does cheer and all that. There are other needs within the community. We want to make sure that we're expanding our program portfolio in order to meet the total needs of the community. And again, making sure, kind of hitting back on that cost recovery, making sure that whatever we are charging for some of those facilities or programs is adequately priced in a tiered schedule that takes into consideration all the particular needs of our community here in Newton County. In terms of conservation, parks inherently, because they're generally green spaces, they overall help improve water quality. They reduce flood risk. The trees that we have, Turner Lake Park, good Lord, the air is beautiful out there, right? So it helps reduce air pollution. We support, these parks support habitats for our wildlife and our pollinators. And if we have a successful community garden program, they also expand local access to fresh produce for some of those food deserts that we might have in the community as well. So overall, parks play a critical role in terms of meeting those needs of the three pillars that NRPA has set out for us. In terms of actual programming, the typical agency nationwide offers about 175 programs a year, okay? And about 102 of those are fee-based. So that tells us that not everything is inherently free, that we do, in order to keep up with our peers, in order to meet trends and generate that cost revenue, we do need to charge something for some of those programs, and it could be a nominal rate. But Overall, those program revenues are some of the largest sources of non-tax income coming into the budget for these departments. We have some target populations in terms of seniors and children, and some of the programs that are available for us to be able to do this. And these are agencies, the ones in blue are the agencies that are comparable to your population that are offering programs like summer camp. About 88% of those are doing that. Teen programs, there's 76% of those communities are doing those actively. In terms of after-school programs, it's 69%. So these are all opportunities looking at our peers on where we might be able to expand on things that we're not necessarily doing right now. Overall, some of the top program trends that we see really has to do with, again, you notice that team sports. Team sports is a little bit low on that list. Look what's up above all of that. Social recreation, themed special events, these natural and cultural history activities, health and wellness. Team sports follows up, and then the fitness enhancement classes. These are the things that nationwide we're seeing as the top things. We're a little bit skewed right now as a community towards team sports, and so we want to see if we can balance that out a little bit more. We always look at, when we're doing programming recommendations, about activity interests by age segments. And this just goes to show that as you are servicing those different age groups, they all have different needs, and they fluctuate over time. As children grow into teenagers and young adults, their needs change. As young adults grow into adults and seniors, their needs change. So again, reinforcing the idea of a diverse level of programming in order to support the community need. I forget if I have all these in here. We did plot out for Dwayne and his staff kind of their participation rates. I could flip through these, but the long story trend is that your program participation rates were on a decline pre-COVID. COVID, they all shut down. But the good news is that immediately after we opened up those programs, after the lockdowns, most of those program rates rebounded. Some of them even exceeded pre-COVID numbers. So what that tells us as a consultant is that there is very strong community need and very strong community support for the programs that you do offer. So we want to continue to leverage that and offer more for the community as much as possible. One of the things that we've asked Dwayne and his staff to look at is to assess why those declines were happening prior to COVID. A lot of times it has to do with like user experience. It could be either issues with the facility, it could be issues with departmental staff, or maybe even officials and all that. At the end of the day, what we've charged the Park Recreation Department to do is to engage in consumer feedback, customer feedback. After you engage in the program, we want to know, how is your experience? Will you be coming back? Is there anything we could do to fix it? And build the metrics in a database so that we know exactly where our weaknesses are and enhance those, and where we can leverage our strengths as a community. We do want to point this out, that in terms of like the public input, this grid, Ms. Katie did a lovely graphic for us. This grid represents the variety of programming needs that the community has asked us for. The items in blue are what we're currently doing. So there's a lot of opportunity to expand on that programming in order to be able to meet the community needs. One of the other things that we wanted to harp on briefly for you guys is, again, that lack of awareness. Just because we offer a program doesn't mean that we get participants flocking to our door. We have to make sure that the community knows it's available and how to get to it. So looking at making sure that we have a marketing plan, a marketing strategy, and marketing staff in order to engage the community and share the word, that's going to be a key element in order to successfully move forward to be able to enhance our recreation here in the community. There's a lot. We have a lot of program recommendations. I will highlight some of them on these slides. But basically, we have limited space in our current facility, so we want to make sure that we evaluate what has to be inside, what has to be outside, and which ones can swap every now and then in order to increase our availability. We want to make sure that we consider extending facility hours. You know, not everybody is available between, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Dwayne? 8 to 8, it doesn't work for everybody in the community. So a lot of departments have recreation centers or community centers that are open till 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night in order to be able to offer that flexibility. They open at 6 a.m. In order to offer that flexibility for the community. So looking at that. trying to decentralize our program so it's not all in one spot. We want to get that social equity out in the community so we can offer programs in multiple locations. We want to diversify in terms of getting culture and arts incorporated into our programming portfolio, natural resources and outdoor education. We'd like to expand on special events. We're currently doing some of those, but we can really leverage that and draw people, not only support the community, but also bring people into the community for those special events and generate some revenue as a community, not just a recreation department. And we also want to make sure that we're expanding our fitness programs to include all ages. Right now, it's a very limited fitness program that we're offering, including, and believe it or not, young kids, believe it or not. My son just bought a set of weights. He's 6 years old, and he's trying to get into fitness. So understanding that need and being able to leverage on that. Again, when it comes to our youth, it's not just athletics. We need to go a little bit further than that and offer some more, and that might include summer camp programs. It might be a youth council that is able to organize and dedicate volunteer hours for community service. And we also need to make sure that we're partnering with our local school district to assess specific youth needs and how we can best partner together in order to address those needs. We want to make sure that we are adequately covering our adults. I'm almost 40 years old. I'm a forgotten population in most recreation departments. My kids are well taken care of, and my parents are well taken care of. The adults in that 35 to 45, 55 age range, they like to recreate too, and so we want to make sure we're delineating between senior programming and active adult programming as well in order to expand on that. One other thing that we saw as a significant opportunity, you do have a great team that has a great vision for therapeutic recreation. Right now, we're a little bit limited historically over the last couple of years in just focusing on the Miracle League, which is a great program, but being able to diversify that to include, other adaptive sports, adaptive art classes, things along those lines, being able to get into therapeutic swim if we wanted to. These sorts of things are all a critical role that we see most parks and recreation departments offering is that therapeutic recreation. And we see a need in this community for aquatics programming. Right now, I believe we have a pool that's not really used for any active programming. And so there's an opportunity there to not only do just general community recreation through an aquatics facility, but there's also an opportunity for active programs such as these, swim teams, senior swim, swim lessons for youth. All these things are opportunities in the community that we can hit. And we're about the size in this population where we should be considering something along those lines. So, in order to do all these wonderful things, we need staff. So let's talk about our staffing. When we do a staffing assessment, we're looking at your overall structure, how staff are communicating or reporting to one another, how that staffing structure compares to benchmark communities. We're always looking for ways to enhance efficiency, and we want to make sure that we're doing good oversight of our programs and facility recommendations that we're looking at. So right now, you guys, we are sitting at 17 full-time and 9 part-time positions in the recreation department. That equates to, I forget, was it 21.3? 21.5. Okay, so what I'm going to show you, if you can keep that in your head, 21.5, and that's full-time equivalents, or FTEs. Okay, that is the benchmark by which we measure everything. So we're going to circle back on that in a second. Generally speaking, this is the breakdown of what our staff are doing. We have a significant chunk of it is in operations and maintenance. We have about a third of our staff are dedicated towards programming. A smaller chunk, a little less than 20% in administration. And we usually have like a capital development person overseeing renovation or new construction projects, and then some other distribution, other necessary tasks. So remember that full-time equivalent, FTEs. On average, the maintenance personnel makes up about 45%, like I said, of that staffing pie. Right now, your maintenance staff is about 35%. So right off the bat, we kind of know that we're slightly low on maintenance staff. So the question then becomes, well, where should we be? So when we look at those comparisons, looking at agencies with your similar size to you all, you should have a staffing level of somewhere around 57 full-time equivalents. So what that means is that right now, you're staffed at about 38% of what we would typically expect to see for a population similar size, similar density as Newton County. When we look at those comparisons to other communities, again, if you take out Fayette County, you could see that we're definitely lower than Walton County. We're about in line with Bartow County in terms of those staffing levels. But again, even that being said, I guarantee if we did an assessment on those communities, they would be below national averages for their respective communities as well. So one of the things that we need to be thinking about, as you know, we're talking about programming increasing, and we're going to be talking about facilities in a little bit. So the idea is that making sure that we have, as these new programs come on board, as these new facilities come on board, we need to make sure that we have staff in order to do it, and we have dedicated staff. We talked about efficiencies. A parks department cannot efficiently run if everybody's doing everything. There are specific roles that they would do in order to have the level of maximum impact, you know, in terms of delivering that level of service for the community. So I'm going to be showing you a tiered implementation structure for the next 10 years in terms of staffing. This is what we are recommending overall in terms of where we would land in 10 years, is that we would have 59 full-time positions and 37 part-time positions. And some of these are tied to facilities, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But I want to give you a little breakdown of how that might happen over the next 10 years. So our tier one, in terms of the next 2 years, this is what we're considering what you should be operating at today. So this will bring you kind of up to par with what you currently are offering in terms of programs and facilities. You'd see we'd be adding 7 full-time and 2 full-time positions to bring you up to about 30.5 FTE. So we're definitely getting closer. Now we're pretty well aligned with some of our benchmark communities, and we're getting closer to that national average. When we get into tier 2, we have some additional needs because we are probably looking at some additional facilities, and we've really started getting some of those new programs underway. And so there's another tier of staffing that would end up having to happen. That starts pushing us a little bit closer towards about that 50 full-time equivalent, again, getting closer to that national average. At the latter half of our planning period, years 6 through 10, we are bringing on some significant new facilities that we're going to talk about in a moment. And the need in order to have dedicated staff for those facilities and for the programs that are at that facilities is going to push us somewhere around 70 full-time equivalents as we go forward. This is essentially a breakdown of what that would look like in terms of the roles of staff that are associated with that growth. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit. We've hit on staffing and we've hit on programming. I'd like to talk to you about the level of service assessment and what that means for us. And this is tied to facilities. So we do an inventory of your existing facilities like I talked about. We basically count, you know, how many ball fields, how many courts, you know, how many community centers, restrooms are in your current facilities. And y'all are a little bit unique in terms of how the department has evolved over the years. So we wanted to make sure that we delineated between Newton County facilities that you all own and operate, facilities that you own but do not operate, and then we also want to make sure that we understand that there are other providers in the community also doing recreation, so we wanted to see how that would look. And so this essentially, I know it's a lot of text, but that's essentially what that would look like. Once we have this done, then we do a gap analysis. So each park or facility is assigned a service classification based on what it does, how big it is, and how it would reach the community. And what this allows us to do is be able to basically do a geographic mapping of like where we're impacting the community with our recreation facilities. What you're seeing here on the map is your Newton County's parks mapped out. And you can see just for NCRD, there's clearly some areas that we are not serving at all. And there are some areas that we are serving, but it's limited service. We're not getting those overlaps like we would normally see. When we talk about the other providers, there are other city parks, and there's also the Y and a couple of other folks, and they're also providing recreation. So we want to make sure we're not just filling in gaps for the sake of filling in gaps for the recreation department. We want to make sure we're assessing the total community need. So that's what you see. We've got a little bit better coverage now that we have those other service providers on. But when we lay that over to the density map in terms of mapping, you can see that generally speaking, like I said, everyone's pretty well covered, but where we have some areas of concern is in our high-density population areas, where we either have no coverage whatsoever, or we have limited coverage, and so we want to address those. One of the other tools that we do in addition to this mapping is level of service analysis. So again, NRPA has great metrics for us to be able to understand a typical agency, how many ball fields per 10,000 people do they typically have? And do we have too many ball fields or too little ball fields? Things along those lines. But basically, we use that as a benchmark, and then we look at it in terms of community level standards to see whether or not we need to adjust those ratios based on your specific community needs. When we plot that out, you can see that as we project out to the end of this planning period, there are a lot of minuses on the back of this. We have a lot of deficiencies in terms of number of facilities in order to support community recreation. But again, putting in those other providers that are in our community, the numbers come down, but we still do have some specific needs. We always like to focus primarily on the bigger items, such as recreation centers or fields, just basically the things that have the highest capital impact in order to see what that would look like. So I'd like to give you a summary of our facility recommendations in order to address these needs. At City Pond Park, we're proposing that 4 new tennis courts get developed, as well as some new outdoor basketball courts. And we'd like to be able to help the Parks and Recreation Department out by having a formal maintenance complex to support their needs. At Denny Dobbs, we see the need for 2 new tennis courts and a new community recreation center with a gymnasium. At Beaver Park, we see a need to develop a tennis court as well as a new outdoor basketball court. At Factory Shoals Park, this is a unique opportunity, I feel, for us as a community. Again, being able to expand our programming offerings. Currently, it is a county asset that is not operated by the Recreation Department. And we see a tremendous opportunity if we were to bring that back under the Recreation Department's purview in order to develop a natural resource area, as well as a cultural resource center. In that, we would love to we have ideas about whether or not there be campsites, as well as playgrounds and some other support facilities at that location. Again, the tremendous opportunity for us as a community. Those are the existing parks. I'd like to tell you what we're thinking about in terms of new facilities in order to get that coverage and also hit the numbers in terms of facilities that we're looking at. We see a need to develop what we're calling a Westside community park to hit some of those cover some of that high density population area. We see the need for a new community center, tennis courts, splash pad, basketball, multi-purpose fields, and a playground. Now, those are just the big ticket items. It's understood that there's going to be pavilions, trails, restrooms, things along those lines as well. In a similar fashion, we see and by the way, that Westside Community Park, we see that as a pressing need, something that should be addressed in the near term. As a future term recommendation, we also recommend developing an East Side Community Park that we're looking at. We are seeing projected growth on the east side of the community. It's not a pressing need, but there we would see we're recommending a recreation center, tennis court, splash pad, fields, and a playground as well in that area. Yes, Commissioner Sanders.
Were you aware of Fairview Community Park that's in District 3?
Yes, ma'am. I'm aware of it.
Because I didn't see it on your slide.
Yes, ma'am. So in we talked at length with the Recreation Department about this. And in our assessment, our recommendation is that Fairview, because of where it is located, how it's accessed, is not of adequate size nor adequate access in order to facilitate the facilities that are needed in that community. So we are proposing a brand new facility in that approximate area in order to meet those needs. We also see, again, going back to the aquatic center discussion, we do see opportunity and a need for an aquatic center with indoor competition pools to support what your community is currently doing, but also opportunity to do therapy in an instructional pool, as well as an indoor family leisure aquatics facility. That property could also easily support a multi-purpose field and a playground to develop some extra community facilities. We feel that the approximate area that we're looking at for that will cover the areas of most need and be able to be most easily accessed by the community overall, in addition to the immediate surrounding areas. We also see that obviously Spring Hill Park is up and coming, and we have some facilities that can be placed there as well, as according to the master plan. We're also looking to develop what we're calling a Highway 36 park with some fields and playground and basketball courts in that area. So, what does all this look like? Similar to the staffing, we are breaking out those capital improvements in terms of a three-year or a three-tier phase. And so the near-term phase, in terms of capital improvement projects over the next 2 years, is basically to address all your planning needs and your deferred maintenance. We estimate that somewhere around $18.6 million over the next 2 years. Going into the Tier 2 projects, this is where we're continuing to work on some of those deferred maintenance items, but now we're starting to develop some new facilities at our existing parks and maybe tackling some of the brand new park properties and facilities that are going there. And we're currently estimating that at about $31 million over a 3-year span. At the back end of the planning initiative is where we're doing the rest of the new, larger, higher impact, higher cost facilities, such as potentially the Aquatic Center or that East Side Community Park, and we're estimating that somewhere around $46 million. And all told, this is essentially how this breaks out, and we'd love to get your feedback on that. But basically what this comes to is that we're looking at about a capital improvement plan of about $96 million over the next 10 years. Which represents about $9.6 million a year in annual spending from a facility standpoint in order to get us to where we believe the level of service for the community has been requested. It was a lot of information. I did the best I could to consolidate it. And as a side note, if y'all would request a separate workshop to go into more detail, we could certainly do that, but I know time is limited for you all this evening.
Well, I think we definitely need to do that, because I'll hate to do a work session where the commissioners or myself don't get an opportunity to ask questions. So Dwayne, I'm definitely looking to schedule another work session so we can, it kind of need to be more of a, now that the information is out, it need to kind of be more of a dialogue back and forth, so questions can get asked and we can get answers. So, but thank you for coming tonight and presenting. It's time for us to go in our board meeting, so I hate to let someone ask questions, then don't give the rest of the commission an opportunity to ask.
Understood.
But I would like to schedule a work session so that we can ask questions about the information that you gathered for this community.
My pleasure.
Yeah. I will. Also, I think it would be great if we can get a copy of it, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir. Not a problem.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for being here, and thank you for putting this together. It's great information, but I would like to have an opportunity to ask questions.
Yes, sir.
All
My
right.
pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you so
all.
much. Thank you. Thank you. I get it. Guys, I seek a motion that we adjourn. It's a motion by Commissioner Sanders and second by Commissioner Edwards. All in favor? Thank you. We stand adjourned. Thank you. We got a couple of minutes, guys. Be right back. No, he'll be on a call. Oh, okay.
SS
Call him in.
Dance first, let me call.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna.
That's gonna be something else, huh?
You did say.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. Today is March 1st, 2022. We want to go ahead and, well, let me read the thought for today. The thought for today is there are three constants in life: change, choice, and principles. That's by Stephen Covey. I'm going to go ahead and officially call this meeting to order tonight. We're going to ask that Commissioner Edwards, if you would, lead us in our pledge. Commissioner Mason, if you would, lead us in our, Commissioner Edwards, if you would, lead us in our invocation tonight, and Commissioner Mason, if you would, lead us in our pledge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And with your permission, before I begin, I want to make a special note of and I don't want to mispronounce her name, Yamaropa. She's the First Lady of Mansfield's Mount Zion AME Church, and I got to know this wonderful lady exercising, walking up and down our road at night and evenings, and even at Beaver Park. Her and I would run each other and talk. Just a wonderful lady. She lost her life this past Thursday, and she definitely leaves a hole in in my life for sure, but in our community, because this church is within feet of my home, and She was a integral part of our community and become a beloved part of our community, and a wonderful lady, as I said. And I just want us to remember them tonight in our prayers, especially that church and her family.
Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dear Lord, thank you for this day, and thank you for another opportunity to get together and do the county's business, Lord. We ask that your guidance, your mercy, your grace, we ask that we do all things in your name, Lord, and we ask that you bless us. We ask that you give us, once again, wisdom and discernment. Lord, we pray for our Mansfield community and our loss. Lord, we ask that you lift us up and comfort that family. And particularly comfort that church and our community, Lord. We ask these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you guys for that. Commissioner Cowan is on by phone tonight. Commissioner Cowan, can you please state where you are tonight?
I'm in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Thank you, sir. And you will be joining the board meeting by call in. I need to amend the agenda tonight to, per our county attorney, to add 10A. 10A, Porterdale is looking to annex some land, and we need to add that for discussion purposes. 10A. 10A. Commissioners, with that, I seek a motion that we approve the agenda tonight.
So moved.
It's been motioned by Commissioner Mason and second by Commissioner Edwards. All in favor? Commissioner Cowan?
Aye.
Thank you. It passes 5-0. Next is citizen comments. This is an opportunity that we allow citizens to make comments about agenda topics only. Agenda topics only. You have 3 minutes to do so. Please state your name and your address for the record, please. You may come at this time. Agenda topics only. Thank you. I don't have anything today in the chairman's report. Next on the item on the agenda is the consent agenda. I seek a motion of approval, please. It's been motioned by Commissioner Edwards and second by Commissioner Mason. Any discussion? All in favor? Commissioner Cowan?
Aye.
Thank you. It passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is finance. Ms. Brittany White, if you would, please come on up tonight.
Good evening.
Good
Tonight,
evening.
we are seeking approval of a budget amendment for a fire truck, or not fire truck, a Tahoe that belongs to the fire department that was wrecked in January 2022. So we're just wishing to utilize the revenue that we received from the insurance company in the amount of $25,096. And the new vehicle they're wanting to purchase to replace the Tahoe is $39,000, so they're wishing to utilize $13,904 from their small equipment. Any questions?
Any questions, guys? I seek a motion, please.
Second.
It's been motioned by Commissioner Edwards and second by Commissioner Mason. Any discussion? All in favor? Commissioner Cowan?
Aye.
Thank you. It passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is item number 10. BOC purchasing, Randy Fincher. Is Randy here tonight? Brittany, you gonna be stepping in? Okay. If you would, please come on up. Yep. Good evening. Thank you, Ms. Trude, for being here.
Good evening, y'all. This is a change order for TUSA Project Consulting. They're the consultants on the public safety radio system we're putting in. And due to the extension of building of the radio system, we need to extend their contract through November of 2022.
Okay. Commissioner, I seek a motion, please.
Second.
It's been motioned by Commissioner Edwards and second by Commissioner Mason. Any discussion? All in favor? Commissioner Cowan?
Aye.
Thank you. It passes 5-0.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Next is item 10A. This was a topic that was added per the county attorney. Ms. Molly, if you want to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the city of Porterdale has sent the county a notice of annexation of property. This property is tax map parcel 0044, parcel number 089. And I think on the screen up there you can see it's across the street from the old golf course and is located along Crowell Road with the intersection with Brown Bridge Road. It's only about 1.8 acres. And it currently falls within the county's Cedar Shoals character area. It's zoned CN, neighborhood commercial. There's an existing building on the property, but pursuant to the annexation into the city limits, they are seeking to rezone that to the city of Porterdale's CG general commercial district. The county's comprehensive plan does not consider the CN as actually appropriate within the comp plan area, and instead contemplates CH. So our office, along with Judy Johnson, reviewed the city's zoning code and compared it to the use tables within the county zoning code, kind of to see where they fall, and they're actually fairly comparable. What that means from the annexation point of view is whether or not we have a valid land use objection. So when the county receives a notice of annexation, we're fairly limited in what we can and can't do. There's set statutory limitations on that, where we can only object if there's a material increase in burden on the county based on a change in zoning, a change in intensity or density that affects the infrastructure and service infrastructure and the cost of that infrastructure. And so that has to be based on that material increase in burden. And basically, because the zoning that is allowed under the comp plan and what would be zoned under the city's zoning are basically comparable, we're not looking at a significant change in intensity or density or a significant change in land use, such that we really think that that would lend itself to a successful objection should it come to that. So to object, we'd have to be able to basically check all those boxes that state law requires of us, and based on what this application is, it doesn't really seem that there is that basis, but we wanted to make sure that you saw the property. Brian, I think there's a more zoomed out version just to give you a little more context of where this falls.
So is it only the strip mall?
I think it's a convenience store.
It's a convenience store, a gas station, okay.
Yeah. And so it's an existing building. The question always is what's going to come next, but that can't really be used as a valid land use objection for an annexation. So, this can provide further contiguity for future annexations, though, across the street is that old golf course, and down south is further municipal limits of the city of Porterdale. So,
Okay.
there could be natural expansion at some point, but.
Okay. Guys, this is for discussion, so we do not need a motion on the floor. Commissioner Sanders.
My only concern, I know we can't stop it, but my only concern with this is emergency services, and that was concern of the citizens in District 3 when the golf course was rezoned and annexed to Porterdale, now building all of the multiple homes and so forth. Is there a plan set in place on how they're going to be utilizing emergency services? So that's what I would need to know. Are they going to be utilizing the county? Are they going to be utilizing Porterdale? We know Porterdale is limited in emergency services. So that's the issue with a lot of the annexation that's going to Porterdale or the smaller cities, because they're still going to be leaning on the county. And it's still going to cost the county money because they don't have all the resources.
That's right.
But they're going to be getting the tax dollars.
Right. So whenever you have annexation, there's always that issue of service. And so we'd have to look at the service delivery strategy to see what provision there is for that. I would expect that to the extent, someone at that convenience store called 911, the sheriff's office was responding. If the city of Porterdale couldn't, the sheriff's office would still do that. I'd have to look at the service delivery strategy to see that, and I can absolutely do that and let you know.
Anyone else? Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if the allowances, for lack of a better term, are similar between the city and the county, what's the goal of the applicant, or do we know?
We can't know. They don't say that in the application. Generally, for an annexation, there's a pretty big range. So sometimes cities are seeking to expand their boundaries so they can gain contiguity for further annexation. Sometimes it's because of, the city maybe being more willing to allow for, more flexible development standards. It really depends. I'm not aware of the particular intent behind this one, though.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. C. When it's rezoned, the person who owned the property will be paying double taxes, if I'm not mistaken, one to the town of Porterdale, and another taxes to the county.
They'd start paying city taxes upon being annexed.
And so, in other words, from my experience, is that like in the city of Covington, we pay two taxes, pay one to the city and one to the county, and it's not good for me. But nevertheless, if they want to do it, I'm good with it.
Anyone else? Commissioner Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I wanted to ask, so once we have an annexation to the city, have we ever seen that in the reverse where there has been annexation from the city to the county? So in the opposite direction?
So there is a state or a statutory process for de-annexation. I've handled that in other jurisdictions. I've not personally handled it for Newton County, but that's absolutely something that can be done as de-annexation, where somebody asks to be taken out of the city limits and just fall within the unincorporated area of the county.
And so do you know, just from your research and the data that you may have, how often that occurs by any chance?
From personal experience, I'd say it's significantly skewed for annexation rather than de-annexation. But, that's spanning a few different jurisdictions. I've received in the past, 6 or 7 years, probably several dozen annexations. I've handled one de-annexation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else? Thank you so much. Next is item number 11. Trudy, if you guys will come on back up, please.
These change orders are the ones that have kind of happened since the beginning of the project. One of them was for a date extension. The second one was for a software subscription that got changed. And then the third one is for the Oak Hill site. We wasn't able to use one of the sites that was originally planned due to it being overloaded. So we moved to another route. And then the last one is going to be a date extension too because of moving that tower. And we just need to get those 4 change orders signed.
Thank you. I seek a motion, please. Can I get a second? Thank you. It's been motioned by Commissioner Edwards and second by Commissioner Mason. Any discussion? All in favor? Commissioner Cowan?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you guys for being
Thank
here
you.
tonight. It passed 5-0. Next, Ms. Amanda Shoemaker, if you would, please come on up.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I believe each of you have a copy of the proposed contract to be considered to extend to the interim county manager, Mr. Jarvis Sims. Everybody has a copy? Okay. So a lot of this is just standard in terms of what is offered to county managers across the board. The first section is the at-will status and the start date. It's anticipated that Mr. Sims will be on board with us starting March 7th, 2022, and the proposed contract is for a year with the term ending on March 6th, 2023. In terms of his compensation, under consideration is that he receive an annual base salary of $150,000. The county will provide comprehensive health and dental insurance as well as pay the premiums for him. Also, the premiums will be paid for his life insurance benefit, which will equal to 2 times his annual salary. In addition, the premiums will be paid for his short-term disability coverage. Under personal leave, the consideration is to allow for him to have accrue annual leave at the rate of 240 hours per year and sick leave at 120 hours per year. And he will be able to carry over the 240 hours of annual leave time. Retirement, the county, for consideration, is the county will contribute 5% of the employee's annual salary towards his 401A account. And if the employee contributes another 5%, then the county will match that contribution up to an additional 5%. In his 401A account, and also that he will be considered fully vested upon the start of his employment. The next sections are just really standard in terms of the county will agree to provide for in his professional dues and subscriptions, as well as any official travel that he may have in the course of his duties to perform services on behalf of the county or to continue his professional endeavors as it relates to his county employment. Also, there is an involuntary termination clause in the contract, and if he is involuntarily terminated, but he's willing and able to perform his duties under this agreement, then he will be entitled to pay monthly salary, including as well as his health, dental, short-term disability, retirement, and life insurance benefits for a period of 9 months. If the employee were to resign, then he would have to give the county a minimum of 60 days notice for those purposes in order to be in compliance with this particular contract. There is also a section in terms of performance appraisals that he will receive that whenever the commissioners deem that they wish to issue him his annual performance appraisal. And if the county employees receive a COLA increase, cost of living increase, then he will receive that as well. And I think those are the specifics in terms of compensations and benefits
Can I get a motion?
for the interim county manager.
Yeah, you can. Can I get a motion so we can get discussion going, please? Can I get a second? There's a motion by Commissioner Edwards and second by Commissioner Mason. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Commissioner Sanders?
I just have a question because on the agenda it says discussion first and then consideration. That's why I was asking, were we discussing it before a vote was going to take place? Because there's some questions I have that are on the contract that concerns me that was similar to the previous contract. So I thought we were going to discuss it first before the consideration based on what the agenda states.
And we get a motion before, I'm sorry. we get a motion before, so we can get it, the topic out on the floor.
Okay, so let's break this down, Amanda.
Okay.
A couple of days ago, I sent you an email, number one, asking, is there going to be a search going out for the county manager position? Because that was what the commissioner stated, and it also was in the public meeting that a search was going to go out. So when is that going out?
Well, it's my understanding that that search will take place after we hire the interim county manager, and we haven't hired him as of yet.
Okay. So let's go to the salary. And I'm trying to see how to word this. When you kind of spoke to us, the salary was a little bit different, what's in the contract. So my question is, why are we increasing the salary for interim? Shouldn't it be increased once we get a county manager, not increase it for temporary or possible temporary? It should be increased if the person becomes a full-time county manager, a permanent county manager.
Right. So there was no set salary agreed upon in terms of this particular position. When I first spoke with Mr. Sims, he indicated, another number, but
Lower number, yeah.
But after further negotiations, then he decided that he wanted to offer the 150.
So was that negotiable? Was that whether he's take it or not if we did not go with the amount that he stated the first time?
Actually, he wanted a higher number,
That
but
was the
then
number.
we settled on 150.
Who was we?
It was HR and Patrick.
Our attorney?
Mm-hmm. Well, I consult with Patrick as well as the chairman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the question I have, because it looks like because we have, the person is considered, and it could possibly, he may be the one that the board decides to be the permanent.
Mm-hmm.
But as an interim, giving a increase in the salary from what our county manager, our previous county manager had, I have an issue with that one.
Mm-hmm.
Going down to Section 5, Health and Disability and Life Insurance Benefits, where it says equal to 2 times the employee annual salary. My question is, does all the employees in Newton County have that same option?
In terms of the county paying the premiums for?
Yeah, and the 2 times the employee annual salary.
Yeah, so the county doesn't pay the premiums in terms of 2 times the employee's annual salary, so no. This right here is pretty much standardized. It was standardized for our previous county manager.
Yeah, we had an issue with that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so
Well,
in
I know
terms
I
of, in terms of the employees paying the premiums for this particular benefit, no, we don't pay 2 times the employee's annual salary, unless, because the county gives automatically $50,000. We're talking about life insurance policy for our employees. So our employees who are making under the $50,000 range, then you can consider it's 2 times the premiums. But like for other employees who are making under $25,000 or around there, then it comes close to paying 2 times the salary. But for the majority of our employees, the county does not pay
in the county. Okay, so that was my concern as well. For the personal leave and accrual, do we have anybody else in the county whose rate is accruing the exact same rate, just being fair across the board?
Well, in terms of the accrual amount for personal leave, we have a policy in place and it depends on the length of service that employees have with the county. And so, as it relates specifically to the maximum amount of time an employee can accrue time, annual leave, the maximum amount of time for general employees would be 200 hours per year, but those employees have 25 plus years of service. But our public safety accrue at a higher rate than our general employees. So with our fire protection employees, they can accrue, the maximum they can accrue is 270 hours.
Okay. I can see that with public safety, because they are putting their lives at risk. In regards to the retirement, and I'm going to ask this the same question, do we have employees that are receiving these same benefits?
No, but oftentimes, because I've spoken with the individuals that provide our retirement services, counties choose to implement what they call an executive type plan for county managers or high-level city administrators. And so we don't have employees that are receiving a same or similar benefit per se within the county, because the county manager position is a standalone position, whereas other counties throughout the state, their county managers or top city administrators, they're receiving a same or similar benefit.
Okay. Under section 9, general business expenses, where it says that we pay for their subscriptions to various professional services, and I know we have ACCG and NACO, a lot of us go to that. What other subscriptions are required for payment for a county manager?
That would have to be determined between you as well as the county manager.
Okay.
Because he has to, in the contract, it says that he must seek pre-approval by the Board of Commissioners before the expenses are paid.
Section D, where it says employee may also use cell phone for personal use, provided that the personal use does not result in unreasonable cost to the county. Why is this permitted, and why is the county, even if they're using ours for personal use? I know as commissioners, our phones can be confiscated any time if we don't separate the two. So why is that permitted? I'm just asking the question.
And that's if he so chooses.
Okay.
I have a cell phone and I don't choose to use it. I have a county cell phone and a personal cell phone, and I don't choose to use my county cell phone for personal business. But it's just the preference of whoever controls the account. Sitting in that position, I would hope that that person who sits in that position will know if you are using your phone for a personal business, then it is subject to open records or.
On voluntary termination, section A, employee agrees to pay employee his monthly salary, including health, dental, short-term disability, retirement, life insurance benefit for a period of 9 months. So that was one of the major concerns we had in the previous contract. Even some of the citizens expressed their concern, because even if we have to let that individual go for certain reasons, because they're appointed, the county is responsible for all of this, not just a 9-month salary. They're responsible for the health, dental, short-term disability, retirement, life insurance benefits. We need to definitely look at this contract, my fellow commissioners, because this is taxpayers' dollars. So that was my question. And then we also have to get when they have accrual of their sick leave and sick time, we still have to pay that as well. So that's addition too. So this is why I said this contract, we need to discuss it before we put something on a vote on a motion, because there's a lot in this contract that definitely needs to be discussed in regards to even performance appraisal that needs to be actually specified, because if he's going to be here for a term of a year, there needs to be a specification of when that performance appraisal is going to be done. If it's within 6 months, 3 months, quarterly, that needs to be specified in this contract before anybody signs it. If I'm going to say this again, if it's me, because I'm utilizing taxpayers' dollars, and I want to make sure that everything is outlined. So that needs to be reiterated in that contract, when that performance appraisal is going to be done, who they're conducted by, which is, of course, the Board of Commissioners. But that needs to be in that contract. So I'm completely, I do believe we need to table this, but the motion has already been on the floor before. The contract needs to be set. I would like to do a substitute motion to table the contract and have tweaking to it, because there are a lot of issues that were also in the previous contract that were brought up that a lot of commissioners on this platform had issues with, but I don't hear anybody talking about it. It's the exact same contract that our previous county manager had, and I don't hear anybody saying anything. So there's some issues in regards to contract.
You're making that in the form of a motion?
Yes. I move that we table the contract to make sure that all the items that are reiterated in here before Mr. Sims signs it, so that's completely in detail.
Commissioner Sanders have made a substitute motion that we table this. Is there any second to that? Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman, I make a second. I'd also like to just say a few words if I could, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. C. I remember the contract, and I remember when we said we were going to pay him $130,000. I think if I'm remember, 135. Well, somewhere around that amount of money. And I left there thinking that's what we were going to start him off, because one of the questions that I asked was, would he be satisfied with that? I think your answer, which relayed to me, was yes. And, I think we need to just maybe tweak it a little bit if, and so that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more discussion? Commissioner Mason?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I noticed in section 11, where it talked about the severance was intentionally omitted. Was there any specific reason why that was intentionally omitted?
Maybe because we're not, I believe it's because we're not offering a severance agreement, that severance that was in the previous contract. This contract was actually drawn up by our county attorney. So perhaps the attorney who's here can give some type of insight as to why this was intentionally omitted.
So I don't actually have information on that. Patrick is on via Zoom if he wanted to address that, why the severance section is intentionally omitted.
Patrick, are you there?
I am here. I could barely hear the question that was asked. Could you repeat it?
No, go ahead.
The question is, Patrick, under section 11, it says it was intentionally omitted, and Commissioner Mason wants to know why that is.
Yeah, hold on 1 second. Let me pull up what that section was. I believe that section dealt with renewals. Since this agreement is intended to be temporary, it's an interim assignment, we removed the renewal section.
Yeah.
And it just dealt with when and how the agreement was renewed.
First, my understanding, Amanda, he doesn't get a severance because he has
Correct.
the interim tag on.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then too, I had another question in regards to under the involuntary termination. I know generally it's 3 to 6 months. Was that actually negotiated? Or did we have that discussion versus 9?
Because it just was standardized in the contract, that was not discussed in terms of the negotiations. What was discussed was the benefits and the compensations and the benefits.
Okay. Do we know what the initial ask was, or are able to disclose what the initial ask was versus what was negotiated?
In terms of what?
Like the salary.
Well, when I approached him initially, he indicated around 137, 140-ish, around that amount. And so that was after, I think we interviewed, the board interviewed him.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but moving forward, doing these talks, then he indicated that, he will be okay at 150.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Cowan, did you have something?
No, I'm done.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor that we table this discussion. I'm calling for the vote. All in favor? Commissioner Cowan?
Nay.
Thank you. All opposed. So I guess it failed 3-2. That reverts back to the original motion. I'm calling for the motion. All in favor? Commissioner Cowan?
Aye.
All opposed? It passes 3-2. Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. Next on the agenda is the first reading for alcohol license, CVS Pharmacy 8418-10267, Highway 36, Covington, Georgia 30014, Bernard Kennedy, Senior, that's District 5. Next is citizens' comments. This opportunity that we allow citizens to make comments. Please state your name and your address for the record. Please, you have 3 minutes to do so. You may come at this time.
Good evening, Board and Commissioners. My name is Susan Jackson, 110 Wisteria Boulevard. I have to exhale, because what I just witnessed is mind-boggling. It's literally the epitome of cutting off your nose to spite your face. This is the same exact contract that we had a problem with. And the questions that were raised were absolutely well thought out and something that we should have tabled. I can't believe we are having this discussion. There has to be something that we're missing. I just can't comprehend. Now, my ultimate goal in prayer is that Mr. Sims succeeds, because we want our county to succeed. I pray that. I do not pray anything for, I just pray that he succeeds and he's well, he's capable. Was he my choice? Absolutely not. I believe Newton County made a horrible decision in not hiring Miss Baber, Miss Lucinda Baber. I believe there is some ultimate, I don't know what the underlying goal is in hiring Mr. Sims. I don't even see why, if he asked for $137,000, why you would give him $150,000. Can someone explain that to me? That makes no sense whatsoever. My next question is about the annexation of that particular property. I don't know if we can find the owner. I have a particular problem with that property. That Shell gas station that's there. The upkeep of that parking lot, the grass, things of that sort is horrible. Tell me, what code enforcement? Does Porterdale have a code enforcement department? Does he have someone I can complain when the grass is not cut, when there's litter everywhere? Who is going to support that particular annexation? And I just want to say to this board, please, please, I want y'all to hit y'all knees tonight. Ask God for direction and wisdom. Ask the Holy Spirit to speak to your hearts and minds, so he can really reveal what the purpose, what the future of our county holds. Because if it's in your hands, I'm terrified.
Anyone else? Anyone else? Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I continue to take phone calls on from seniors 65 and older who are still paying the school tax. We have zero control over the school tax. What I'd like for this board to do is and I can't help but believe this is a problem that transcends all district lines, right? So that we somehow put our heads together and look to relieve our citizens 65 and over of an amount that somehow approaches their school tax. I don't know how we pull that off. I'm not smart enough to do that. It seems like Commissioner Cowan had worked or had maybe discovered some type of exemption at one time, and I don't know if we pursued it. I don't know if we ran that to ground or not. But I continue to get those phone calls and those concerns. That would be, after internet, that would be number one on the phone calls I get. So I just like for us to find a way, look for a way to maybe help our citizens 65 and older at some point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Mason. Thank you. Commissioner Sanders.
I want to thank all of those who participated in the Black History Parade that was this weekend. With this being the last day of Black History Month, and also the first day of Women History Month. I just want to give some facts for Black history and some facts for women history. Just to say, Shirley Anita Chisholm was the first African-American woman elected to the United States Congress and the first African-American candidate for a major party nominated for President of the United States. So she paved the way for a lot of women that are in politics right now. Our first known African-American to be elected to public office was Mr. Wentworth Cheswell. In 1783, James Durham was our first African-American to formally practice medicine without an MD. And he was a doctor who also opened his practice in New Orleans. In 1837, Dr. James McCoon Smith was the first formally trained African-American medical doctor in the United States of America. So just to give some facts and to appreciate Women History Month and Black History Month, has been the last day. I just want to thank everyone participating in the parade and celebrating history.
Thank you. Commissioner Henderson.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. C. You know, I just want to briefly talk about Miss Donna Watts Pace. She was a Newton County. In fact, she may have been I believe she was a slave at one of these plantations that we still have. It could have been murder farm, and I think some call it Gators Plantation. But she survived slavery and she married. And her husband, they didn't move out of the county, they remained in the county. They bought property over at Donna Pace. In fact, Donna Pace is named after her. And she bought the property, and she had an orphanage. She brought kids from slavery with her, you know, in order to help them, her and her husband. And they grew up to be really good citizens. But 2 years after she died, guess what? She was all forgotten. And when finally history, you know, caught up a little bit with her through her papers, they found out that the people who owned the property didn't want to own it. They said, we don't want even a little plaque on it. But glory be to God, we serve a good God. Because when we did Donna Pace Park, guess what? We made sure that the plaque that remembers Miss Donna Pace Watts were there. So you can be a slave and they can forget about you. But if God wants to remember you, he'll find a kind heart to bring up and remember what you had done for our community. And lastly, but not least briefly, the first time in the history of Newton County, you can go to a building, a little small building. We had nothing at first, and see the Afro-Americans who had once been leaders in our community, like Mr. Forrest Sawyer, and several others, like Mr. T.K. Adams. In fact, it was named after Mr. T.K. Adams. And, you know, and those are people that we never forget, at least as long as I live. And I shall always thank God for them being in the community, so they be role models for little folks like me. Thank you, Mr. C.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Cowan.
No comment.
Thank you, sir. I seek a motion that we adjourn. There's no need for executive session tonight. Can I get a second? Second. It's been motioned by Commissioner Henderson and second by Commissioner Mason. All in favor? Commissioner Cowan?
Aye.
Thank you, sir. We stand adjourned. Thank you, sir, for calling in tonight. Huh? Okay. No, I do it. Yeah, thank you.